By the way, I did finish watching If Anyone Builds It, They All Die.
Yeah, me too. We all die.
Thanks for the spoiler.
Spoiler
I haven't
alert.
finished listening to it yet.
Yeah, the title should be a giveaway, dude. Come on. How much help do you need?
Welcome to Project Synapse. We've got Marcel Gagné, we've got John Pinard, and we have me. And we're back with you Saturday morning. I was actually in a wonderful place, Parry Sound, Ontario, speaking to the mayor's luncheon in a district called Seguin, and a group of about 80 entrepreneurs. And the interest in AI there was just phenomenal. And it was so interesting to see the audience or see people, because we have these talks every week and I'm doing podcasts all the time, but I'm getting less and less time to actually see people. And I'm going to actually go out and do more of these talks because it's quite interesting. Portion of people, total fear of what's happening. They don't know, they don't understand it. They feel out of control. One lady came up to me and said, why are we doing this? And I had to tell her as nicely as I could, hey, me.
It's not me.
She saw me, I think, as an apologist for AI. I don't think that's what I presented, but but people have a frustration that they need to get out. There are business people who know that there's going to be an impact. They don't know what to do. And there's some people who think there's a steamroller coming and they're just deer in the headlights, to put together two metaphors in one sentence that have no relationship to each other.
And a steamroller going toward a deer that is just standing there looking at the steamroller's headlights.
That's it. A
terrifying.
Steamroller with headlights. Yeah, that's
it.
Actually, that's a pretty good analogy. And then there's me, the podcaster and the author. I'm holding up my book and saying, I got to do better promotion. And probably the audience here thinks I do the effective promotion about my book, but I don't think I really do. I end up talking to people about all of the issues that they were facing. So
The best promotion.
I think so, actually.
Just to tie in, Jim, to your discussion in Parry Sound, I was at the Microsoft AI tour this week. And for those that are in Toronto, it was held at the International Center, which is an enormous building out by the airport. Normally, they have 5 buildings there. Normally, a car show will have 2 or maybe 3 buildings. They packed 4 of the 5 buildings. It was just, I've never seen that many people together for a single event. I've seen it for computer shows in general, but for a Microsoft AI tour, to have that many people in one place it really hit home that, to me, everybody's waking up going, oh my God, we need to learn about this. We need to know more about it. There were some that were very knowledgeable, that they were there because they wanted to get into vibe coding or they were already into vibe coding. But there was an awful lot of people there that were just going, what the hell is this AI thing? And how's it going to impact me in business? It was astonishing to see how many people were actually there.
Yeah, and I always forget the name of the benchmark that you're watching.
Sorry, there are several, but the one I'm talking about is Alan's conservative countdown to AGI. And the reason that one is interesting is it's got a big friendly heater that goes, it's in the red, and then we go to the light blue and dark blue and stuff like that. So it's actually showing you where we are on the chart. Here, have a look. This is what it looks like. So that's the conservative countdown to AGI. As you can see, the SI one hasn't started yet, but then when there's an update, he describes why it's gone up, if it's gone up. So there are regular updates there as well. It's just interesting to watch. But we're at 95%. If you want to think about that as the nuclear clock, it's 5 minutes to midnight or 5 seconds to midnight.
And the last week, and we've obviously done the stories in hashtag trending. There's one in this morning, and I've been following them. I think Sam Altman is getting much more comfortable with the number of 30 to 40% of the workforce will be affected in the very, very near future, and with AGI within the next 3 years. When I was asked my prediction, as I was telling you guys earlier, in my prediction, I've got at 3 years, I have about a 30 to 40% certainty right now that we'll be at AGI. In 8 years, I have 100%, without even thinking of it.
You know that I have issues with the term AGI in the sense that it's a set of goalposts that we've been moving for quite a while. And in many ways, I think we actually achieved AGI by the definitions that people were floating around 5 years ago.
I agree.
Something that is capable of doing most tasks as well as most humans. The fact is, now we're saying or better than most experts in a field is now what we're saying, experts in a particular field. So we've moved the goalpost so that we're not talking about the average person or the average employee. We're talking about experts within their fields. And by the way, I'm sticking to my number, which is the one that, like, Sally about 2 years ago asked me what my prediction was for when we would reach something that would satisfy everyone's definition of AGI. And I said end of 2026. So I'm sticking to that.
But I think the definition of AGI has become closer to ASI in people's minds.
Agreed.
I honestly do.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I think at the classic definition of AGI, which is, I think, a little simple, I think is very little movement, but is going to be that last take it over the line. And we'll deal with errors for the most part and a little bit of the restrictiveness of thought. I think that's all we need for AGI right now. I think it's okay. These are minor accomplishments. And my feeling is they've already been accomplished. They're just not releasing the models. Now, that's not a conspiracy theory, but we think about it. For it to happen according to your timeline, they've already got it working in the lab and they're testing it. Because it's going to take them a year to make sure that hopefully that the safeguards are on. Because at AGI, the model can start to create itself. So you can start to think about a model that creates models. Once you get to that, and I don't care if it can create a primitive model of itself. Once you get there, that prediction in the book, and I'm not saying that everybody dies, but the prediction that they have in the book that once AI can create an AI, we accelerate at a level we've never seen.
Yeah, and there are obviously a lot of conspiracy theories out there. One of the conspiracy theories is that there's a group, a cabal of tech designers or tech billionaires pushing for an acceleration to the development of AGI so they can basically take over and control the entire world. And the thing that's interesting about that book, if anyone builds it, we all die, is of course they're basically saying, listen, if you actually create this thing, it's not going to play by your rules. So the idea that somehow you can control this thing that you're trying to create is ludicrous in and of itself. But then, of course, you've got the techno-optimist, which I confess I am to a large degree a techno-optimist, who believes that there's no reason for the technology to kill us. And the technology will allow us to solve such insanely huge problems that we're dealing with, including things like the various destabilization, the fact that there are people out there who, in a world of ridiculous abundance, don't have enough to eat, don't have clothes on their back, don't have a roof over their heads, despite the fact that we have insane amounts of wealth and more than enough to take care of everybody on the planet. We're still there. Then we've got climate change, we've got pandemics. It's hard to imagine with the world that we are living in today, with the conditions, socio-political, whatever, that we can solve these problems. So I feel like there are some people out there who are accelerationists in the sense that they're not looking for something to take over. They're looking for something to help us solve the problems that we've got that seem increasingly insurmountable. And I confess I am one of those.
One of the interesting things in this book, and then well, depends where you guys want to go with the discussion, but I think we can move on to some of the other things we're going to talk about. But if this book was, I'm listening to it, I listened to the audiobook, I didn't read the book, and I had just completed my own audiobook and gone through it again. And I realized if you read Alyssa, my book, you will see a very probable escape theory. And that was just astonishing to be listening to these guys talk about how AI will escape. And that was, I won't give the answers or do a spoiler on the book, but there is an escape theory in there that I wrote, and it's perfectly plausible. Actually, it's more than plausible. It's probably, I think it's how AI will get out. And it'll be a model of the two things that happen in the book, but you got to buy the book to find out, or buy the other book. Take your pick. Both. You can listen to both. Yeah, they're both audiobooks. Anyway, so we were going to talk about vibe coding this week.
Yeah.
But the week also exploded.
It did. It did. Damn all of these companies with all of their damn releases.
It was astonishing. Everything got released. Claude Sonnet 4.5 came out, and I know you were playing around with vibe coding this week, and we're playing around with, presume you were looking at Claude as well.
I've been doing vibe coding stuff for a while now. I've got a couple of clients where I found that the only way to achieve something reasonably quickly to not bankrupt them was for me to enlist the aid of an AI to be able to do some of the things that need to be done. And of course, I only have so much time in my hands, so it's not like I can bill 40 hours a week. I don't have 40 hours a week to bill. But I've been using these tools for a while now. And for a while, I mean like a few months. And one of the ones that I have quasi settled into, I tried Windsurf. I tried using just the command line to spin up code, which I have done as well, by the way. In fact, I started out doing it that way. And then at some point, I decided that using an IDE, an integrated development environment that's based on VS Code being an open source visual editor or a development suite, an IDE, that is also the back end, I believe, of Microsoft's Visual Studio. They use VS Code on the back end to build Visual Studios. Anyway, and of course, somebody out there can beat me up and tell me if I'm wrong on that, but I think it's the same thing, actually. I think on the back end, they're using the open source code. But VS Studio is at the core of things like Windsurf and Cursor and some of these other applications. And in fact, a few days ago on a lark, I decided to see whether I could recreate Cursor by just using MCPs to plug in so that it would talk to ChatGPT or talk to Claude Sonnet. And you can do that. You can largely recreate just downloading it. And assuming, of course, you've got a plus tier subscription to any of these models, you don't have to pay. You're doing primarily vibe coding in the sense that you let the system do most of the work for you. Then you can make your own. Like you can actually roll your own by just downloading VS Code, turning on MCPs, and tying into these models. Anybody can do that. And in fact, Cloudflare just released their own vibe coding toolkit so that you can deploy your own vibe coding environment through Cloudflare. So there are these things out there.
On Cloudflare, I wanted to get into that and take a look at that because Cloudflare, of course, is known for security and protection. They protect you from DDoS attacks, and they have a security suite as well. I think, was it Cloudflare the one that started by a Canadian? I think so. But Cloudflare was interesting in this. And just for everybody out there, because some people tune into this because they are developers, MCP, Model Control Protocol, really the thing that Anthropic came up with that helps connect you with different environments from the AI. If you know what it is, then I'm oversimplifying, but you're smarter than me, so you don't need my help. That's pretty good.
Yes, Cloudflare was co-founded by a woman from Saskatchewan.
I did
Cool.
with her, and she's fantastic. She's just brighter than hell and a really interesting company. So where was I? I was somewhere.
You were talking about vibe coding. We were talking about vibe coding tools.
Yeah.
We were going to throw something out about that. Yeah.
And this is the thing, and I get to the 80% rule. When you get to amateurs like me, who get bored easily. I took us up on this thing, and I've actually done I used Claude and programmed 2 things for a website, games that dealt with how I would facilitate a meeting. I put the ideas together so that you could pick the ideas. They would become bigger symbols as more and more people signed on to them. The definitions would carry with them, and it would actually create a visual thing that was happening in real time. That I could do on the web. I think even I figured most of it out in under a couple hours, and that was because I was starting from a cold start. I would now have a problem migrating that to integrate with a website. I'd have to actually spend a fair amount of time, and that's no longer my skill set.
There are the tools where you're creating an application for your organization or for whatever purpose it is that you've got in mind, but that is largely desktop based. So it's things that you're going to run on your desktop or that you're going to run on a mobile device, that's a standalone application. Those are vastly different than things that you would create in something like Firebase Studio. Firebase Studio is from Google, and Firebase Studio is fascinating because, first of all, it's ridiculously cheap, as in mostly free. I think you have to have something like 1 million or 10 million visitors before they start charging you for the application that you create on this thing. It's a ridiculous amount of traffic that they allow you for free. And of course, you still have to sign up with an account there and tie it to a credit card on the off chance that you do something like that. But I've played with Firebase Studio for months now, and I've never spent a penny on it. And I've got like $10 in the kitty, and there's still $10 in the kitty months later. So that is an interesting thing because you build the entire thing in the browser, so like on their system, and then you give someone a link to the application that's created, and they run it entirely from there. There are other systems like that out there that do that. Bolt is another one that's like that, where the entire application is still online. In other words, you don't have to have a Python environment on your PC, on your Mac, on your Windows PC, on your Linux PC or whatever, and keep all those things up to date. And then, of course, then there's Lovable, which is another one where the whole thing is sitting out there on the internet. So there are different levels of these things. But even if you're using something like Cursor or you're using something like Windsurf, they're like the 2 big ones for the desktop VS Code-based environments. If you're using either of those, it'll also tie into your GitHub account. And in fact, Codex will tie into your GitHub account. So it can point to your own personal repositories. And of course, when you make changes, you can tell it to keep your repositories up to date. In other words, do your Git push or your updates so that everything is always up to date. And you can always revert back to an earlier version of the code if you wanted to do that. So there is a level of tool that is available for almost everyone. If you wanted to, you could open up ChatGPT or Claude, open up Canvas, or in Claude, of course, it's called Artifacts, and then just say, I want to build a game that does this, blah, 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 and it'll build it in a little window on the side.
Yep.
But if you want something to publish to the world at large, you'll want one of these other tools, or you'll want to obviously be running your own server like I do and like you do, Jim, where you can push your own applications to a website and so on. So there are a lot of different levels of these things, but the starting point can be almost no knowledge whatsoever. And then you can push it up to the level where you would use something like Cursor or Windsurf, because then you actually do have the opportunity to examine the code and go in and make changes and so forth. But these days, a lot of us, myself included, just talk to it. This is what I want.
So-
No, you didn't do it right. Take a screenshot, put a little circle around the thing that you want changed, feed it back into the AI, and it makes the changes for you. It's really impressive.
Marcel, let me ask, looking at this from a corporate world, a lot of what I've seen and even what we've talked about to me seems more, I'll call it standalone, but is vibe coding at a point where it is, I'll call it enterprise grade, where you can actually build, if somebody wanted to build their own financial application to run their business, is it at a point to be able to do that yet?
I'm going to say yes and no. There was that, first of all, Sonnet 4.5, one of the big things that they put out this week. And we're in the age of agentic coding now. And this is actually one of the reasons that the counter, I think, clicked up, is that agentic coding is a thing. You can have a conversation with Claude and say, this is how I imagine the application. You talk it through and you decide what it is you want. And then you tell Claude to go out and build it. And apparently I obviously have not tested this, but apparently they have been able to let Claude go off and run for 30 hours straight, going back and forth, testing the application as it builds it, making changes, integrating updates, and at the end of those 30 hours, spit out a complete enterprise-ready application on the other side. Those are serious chops that we're talking about in the perspective of an AI coding machine. The reason I say no, and there are people who say, developers sometimes spend as much time debugging the code that gets spit out by these things as they do having the machine write it. The thing that they don't tell you, and the thing that the people who want to push this negative view of it don't tell you, is that the person would spend 3 times that much time to build the initial code base that they then go in and fine tune and edit with the AI. In other words, they'd have spent a hell of a lot more time. Maybe they spend more time debugging the final code than the AI takes building it, but they would have had to build it themselves and then go in and debug it. So is it ready? Yes and no, but mostly yes.
I think there's some issues on security we need to think through in terms of the code, because I think security of the code is there. But the other piece of this, and there have been credible studies saying that people think because they do a rapid generation of the code, but then spend a lot more time fixing it on the back end for bugs and things like that, they're actually 20% less efficient, but they think they're more efficient. There's a good study on. I don't know who these programmers are that generate the code that doesn't take hours and hours to debug, and none of them have ever worked for me. Like, we did a project right now with real programmers, no AI, nothing like that. We got to the end of the project and surprise, we have about 2.5 months of work to do to fix some of the things that have changed along the line, where bugs are starting to come up in UAT and all those sorts of things. We've completed the code. Our large system test is still going to take more time than we think. Gosh, when has that ever happened? So I'm a little suspicious about what type of code do people think that programmers produce. I considered my productivity stats were errors per line of code. I use that because I was at the top of the heap. Finally, I could put more bugs into a program than you can faster. And we joke about that, but if you've hung around development as long as I have, the joke that programming is introducing bugs into perfectly good code is not a joke. I've worked on big mainframe projects and all this other stuff. I don't see this end point where you're chasing bugs and dealing with stuff as being so long. If it's shorter now, then I'm amazed, but I don't think so.
So a long time ago, back when I was in school studying programming, there was a stupid little song that would get hummed, and it was something along the lines of 99 bugs in the computer code, 99 bugs in the code, patch one line, recompile 100 lines, 100 bugs in the computer program.
And there was the old joke about the end of the world coming, and Bill Gates goes to meet God, and he comes back to his team and says, I've got some good news and some bad news. Here's the bad news, the world's going to end tomorrow. Here's the good news, we won't have to fix all the bugs in Windows 95. We know this happens. So I think I'm dying for something that actually deals with that on a realistic basis that I could believe. And I think that's what we need. And security. Once we got to this point, the problem we had, I think, with vibe coding on an enterprise level was that you had to intervene so many times. It could only go for so long, and then it would go off track. If the guys from Sonnet are halfway right, and you can actually run for 30 hours on a program, you can start to think about things like taking old COBOL systems and starting to reconfigure them. And that will be a godsend, because right now, as much as you may think that there's going to be bugs in this vibe code, we have old COBOL systems that are still running, that are running enormous parts of our infrastructure that nobody knows how to maintain anymore.
Yep.
In the financial world,
yes.
Yeah.
But the other thing too, though, is let's not forget, when we started doing Project Synapse a little over a year ago, think back to where AI was there versus where it is today. Now put vibe coding on top of that. Vibe coding has really only become very prominent in the last 3, 4, maybe 6 months. So give it another year. Give it another year and a half and see where vibe coding is at there. I think you're just going to see exponential enhancements with vibe coding and the rest of that. The same thing with agentic.
And you've been around for GL.
around.
GL systems.
Wow.
I put in 4 GL systems in real companies that were less stable than what is being produced now. And I know, because I know what was underneath it. We had one COBOL generator we used, and that it was called Catalyst. We ran an entire financial system out of this thing. And when I saw it, I got the job. I didn't know. But they had this marvelous thing that generated COBOL code. It was just wonderful and all this sort of stuff. The first time we had a bug in the system, they dropped out the COBOL, and I looked at it and went, oh, my God, we'll never read this. Because it generated lots and lots and lots and lots of COBOL.
Just because it generated COBOL doesn't mean it generated good COBOL.
It generated a lot.
Good versus does it work? First of all, I just want to give a nod to Andre Karpathy, who is the guy who came up with the term vibe coding. He was on a podcast episode, if I remember correctly. I don't remember whose podcast, but he was talking about the idea that he doesn't actually do any coding anymore. He just has a text-to-speech thing. So he just pushes a key and he talks to the computer and they have a conversation. It's kind of like a vibe. Your vibe coding. They just threw it out like that. And that became the term that everybody was using for coding. Andre, buddy, what I was going to point out though, John, you said, are these things enterprise ready? There are an awful lot of things, applications that people could use, need on the spot, that have nothing to do with public-facing stuff. You need to be able to sift through a pile of data, or you need to look up something that you know is hidden out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And if you had a little program that could go in and look at the stuff, you could actually answer those questions for people. And those are the sorts of things that I think people underestimate the value of. I need a program to do this today. We'll talk to the budget office and see if we can get some people on the team and design something like that. And 6 months later, I'll have this little program for you that will find the information that you need today. Or I just have the system and I say, look, and I'll give you a concrete example that I worked on for somebody recently on a Shopify store. They had things where it was entered by hand initially, and the SKUs for a lot of the products were coded in all sorts of weird ways. Sometimes they had cut and copy and pasted it and stuff like that. So they didn't fit anything. And it's how many of these are in the system and how can we clean them up? You could go through 5,000 or 6,000 products in your store and look at every single one of these things. But what I did was I brought up ChatGPT Codex, ChatGPT 5, and I said, look, this is what I'm trying to do. I just want to go through the entire product list on a Shopify store and find anything where the SKUs are just like wacky because of how they were entered, because we can't update them with new product and so forth. And it spit out a program for me in about 20 minutes. I didn't know how to connect to the Shopify store's API. It told me how to do that. So I created an API key, which then 20 minutes later, I had a report of all of these numbers that were out of whack, so that then, granted, somebody still has to go in there, but at least you knew where they were. You knew where the problems were. And I didn't know what it would have taken a year, 2 years ago to do something like this. You would probably have had to go through manually.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'll tell you right now, Shopify does not have a clean way to do this sort of stuff. You would have had to go through every single one of them, export everything to a spreadsheet, and then analyze everything through the sheet. Godsend to people who need to do something.
And this is horrendous. And when you're talking about, you think about what we could do as an Excel sheet. By the way, much of the analysis of Excel is gone for that because you don't need it. But that's another, we'll go back to that point. But right now, we're dealing with a project and we have data from history of 10 years worth of data. There's problems in it. We don't know why, but that's normal in this sort of thing. Right now, we've been going through with code. We've had people doing manual reviews and all those sorts of things that you have to do. I'm dying for us to be able to ingest a data set that large, because I will bet we would find most of the errors in minutes. And that's weeks and weeks of work. But let's just go back over this and just a couple of things, though. I don't know. When we read these things, we see these stories, I just don't know where they come from. For instance, productivity. Prototyping is dead. You don't need to spend 3 weeks doing a mock-up for users that has no logic behind it anyway. And we do those meetings where we say, oh, there's no logic behind this, or we have very simplistic logic. You can actually prototype a system working with a business user in hours. Now, is it the bulletproof code that you want to put in there? Maybe not. But how much of our problems and developments were miscommunications and specifications? Even if you have the most insecure development in the world, the ability to be able to say, have we got it? Did we get it right? I don't know, because I worked with a lot of programmers that if I could have just exactly told them what it was that we wanted and given them a good test bed to say, check your answers against this, I know people who could generate systems in a flash, even hand coding.
And I'm thinking, sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, when I was asking about is vibe coding enterprise grade, I guess really what I meant was more, is it capable of being used to build like a full-blown ERP system? And the reason why I ask is there's a lot of businesses out there that are very niche, and that if you try to go out to market to get a traditional ERP system, you either have to modify the hell out of it if you can, or you end up having to modify your business to suit the application. And my thinking is that you could get a lot of these niche businesses that could now potentially use vibe coding to, whether it's them or a consultant or somebody, but to actually build an application that fits their business to a T, which makes them so much more productive.
Yeah, because you're using something off the shelf and modifying your own processes to fit the thing that you bought off the shelf.
But that's what my company's been doing for the past 20 years. And I'm trying to edge out of doing development. I don't want to do development anymore. Not just because I want to have more time on my hands, because every development project goes really smoothly and we're making money.
And then it doesn't.
And I've got to get involved and spend way more time than I want. But the whole point of that, as I get through this, is you can do that today. I'm not sure how solid the code is, but up until now, you were dealing with frameworks. And that was the big thing, where you would find something uses a framework. You end up doing a ton of work in terms of building these systems. But it depends on the level that you want this system to be at. I think the interesting thing about vibe coding is a transition in many aspects, because I'm now talking about outcome programming. And I'll give you an example. I wanted to do this speech, and I was talking to this council in in Seguin. Seguin is part of the area of Port Perry. We did a speech at the Mayor's Council. And I wanted to present them with an analysis they could do. And here's the usual analysis. How many businesses do we have out there? What is the impression that people have of those businesses when they visit them? So how are we doing as an area in terms of all of the visitors that we have and the tourism that we have? A big part of our economy. And I thought, geez, I'll do a little start of that. And I'll just do a sample of how I would tackle that. Now, if I was going to do this as a consultant, I'd have spreadsheets. I'd be working for weeks. I'd have people doing interviews all over the place. I'm not kidding you. I tested it out on our own county where I actually know the data pretty well. 45 minutes. 45 minutes. I had something I would go in and present to council. It scanned 100 businesses. It went through their Yelp reviews. It pulled out the top 10 problem children. It isolated the problems. It put quotes together for them. I then went in and did some research in terms of government statistics that you can find out there in terms of other alternate forms of tourism we could do. And I'm not kidding you. I'm been a consultant for a long time. I could have presented that report. Not as something that would have said, I've got absolute detail, but you never have absolute detail. But I would be able to say, these are our problem areas. And if I went out and did this for everybody presented this to people in our county, they would tell me I was right. I know, because I know the people. So then I tested it out. I've got a friend who runs a business here, and I benchmarked him against this. I came back with an absolutely accurate answer. But that's what I mean. And a lot of this stuff is, and people go, is it always absolutely accurate? No assessment like this is absolutely accurate. There's always some statistical variances and things like that. But guess what? My program pointed those out, areas where I needed to do a little deeper dive. And I'm just saying, that's 3 to 4 weeks. If you actually did that as a county, you'd have the council meeting, you'd have to figure out the budget, you'd have to put somebody in charge of it. You would be 3 months and tens of thousands of dollars. I have no idea. I actually do have an idea, but I'm not going to say, of how much would be put into that. And you'd have the babysitting and the status meeting and all that sort of stuff. I'll walk into the office with this in 45 minutes, and we could start to have a reasonable discussion about where we go from here. To me or Marcel, you've talked about it. You've got all of this problem on a Shopify system, and you can now start to isolate that. If you can't be more productive doing that, go home. I'm sorry. I don't believe the lack of productivity numbers.
Again, you have to take into consideration who it is you're talking to and, what it is that they're trying to prove. Remember that book from all those years ago, How to Lie with Statistics?
Yeah, I thought I wrote that.
There's a narrative. There's a narrative that...
Sorry.
Mine was called Myers Configure.
Okay, so I wanted to show you something, just to give you an idea. Creating something on the fly that you can just then use doesn't have to be something where you think, there are all these productivity issues associated, not productivity issues, but there are all these problems associated with it. There are all these dangers associated with doing something. And something can be as simple as, I want this application right now. But of course, you can have something fun. If you take a look in our private little Discord chat, I pasted a link to an app that I created on the fly called Ephemeral Flow, which I told it that I wanted something which was a productivity app, which lets you focus on your tasks, where everything that you put in the checklist disappears after a set period of time. And I set it for 60 seconds. So you've got a to-do list where everything in the to-do list disappears in 60 seconds. And just to make it possibly actually useful, I put a Pomodoro timer in with it. And this is something that I did in a very short period of time. And it's something that you can access off the web, and I can share it with other people. I don't have to worry about whether my personal data is secure. I'm letting Google worry about that for me.
Yeah.
It's their system. They basically run the world. And I'm sorry, if there's going to be like a major security fail over on Google, we're all screwed.
Yeah. I guess I've worked at so many places over the years where if we had these tools, we would have been just enormously much more productive. So maybe the problem is that people have gotten more productive and that they just don't see the gap, or they're in denial. I do believe, like I said, that some of the coding problems in terms of the quality and the security of the code, if you're going to maintain it, are something. But again, divide your systems into those you're going to maintain and those you could just throw away. I think I can mention Cisco at this point because it's a long time ago. But I went in to do architectural training at Cisco. And we were trying to train them, this is in the early 2000s, and we were trying to train them on architecture to generate more quality code in terms of the web code. And one of the guys, quite a senior person in their organization, looked at me and said, "Why would I do all this?" He said, "Why would I do all this work on this architecture? If the code doesn't work, I'll throw it out and write some more." And he was right. For the stuff he was doing, when you think about it, he had the hubris of trying to bring a cannon out to solve this big problem. And the reality was he was right. He needed 5 screens. They needed to work. They needed to take names. They needed a couple of things. He could do it in an afternoon with a Diet Coke and a sandwich. And because they were all healthier there, I got that Diet Coke and the sandwich. They're not eating cheesies. And at that point, they had water in all the fridges and all that sort of stuff. Why would we bring out all of that to deal with a problem that was very simple? We needed a very simple little system. And he said, "I'll just throw it away and I'll write a new one if it doesn't work, or I'll go fix it."
And you talked about people that are saying that they're not as productive, or they're not more productive through the use of AI. And I often wonder how many of those people use AI on a regular basis. Because
I would argue that a lot more than are willing to admit.
Yeah, but even for me, one of the things that I will say is that the more I use AI, the better I get at it, the better the results are, the faster the results are, the more accurate. And for somebody that is a casual user, may not be dramatically more productive. But somebody that uses it 3 or 4 hours a day is going to be a lot more productive than somebody who uses it 3 or 4 hours a week.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt for a second because I want to bring in something that we don't usually think about when we have these discussions. And then at some point, I'd like to give a little demo, okay, for fun.
Yes.
But one of the things that we generally don't take into consideration, and I was chatting with my wife about this morning, we were talking about the rapid pace of the world. And of course, we're talking about the changes. If you actually look back over your life, and we're all guys of a certain age here, if I can use those terms.
29 and holding.
So
let's put it this way. I'm looking back over more than I'm looking forward.
Yeah. Okay. To quote Monty Python, as I did a little bit earlier, we've been around, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Anyway, we've been around. And if I look back over several decades of my life now, the changes that I can lay along a chart of time are incredible. They are incredible. But we are beings that are built to think in linear terms. We don't think in terms of an exponential curve, of an accelerating curve. And that means that we have trouble seeing the future in an ever accelerating way, which is why this whole thing about AGI and ASI and moving toward the singularity, which is, by the way, the point where we are no longer able to figure out what comes next because it's moving faster than any human being can possibly ever keep up with. So that's what that whole singularity thing is all about. And it's an exponential curve that's been going on for the entire history of humanity. But if you've got like 0.000001 and you double it, it doesn't look like anything. And that's the history of humanity. We've been doubling these little tiny numbers, but now the numbers are big and we're doubling very rapidly toward really huge numbers. It's that whole 1 grain of rice on the first square of the chessboard story, the parable. But eventually the exponential curve takes it away and you can't keep up with that. So that makes it very difficult for us to think in terms of, wow, where could things possibly be 2 years, or in your case, Jim, 8 years down the road where you're 100% certain. But it also makes it damn near impossible for us to look back, okay? And looking back, we have these discussions about, oh my God, this isn't happening, or this is happening quickly, or I can't believe that this hasn't happened yet. That's because we're basing everything on what happened yesterday or what happened a month ago, not what happened, again, November 2022, November 30th, 2022, when ChatGPT was first released, okay? That was the big seminal day when suddenly everybody thought of AI as this window that you typed in and it gave you answers or it talked back to you. That was the day that the Turing test was really blown away forever. But because we can't look back any better, we look back in terms of there's this big line of things that have happened, because It's just a memory. That's all it is. It's just a memory at this point. You can't apply this nonlinear thinking even going backwards. And in terms of productivity, what people are saying, is it making me more productive? Is it? Because you're basing everything on what your world is like today, not what it was like 5 years ago, because you can't really think in terms of 5 years ago. We're not good at that shit. In the same way that we're not good at thinking forwards, because we're linear thinking beings. We think in terms of yesterday was basically like it is today, and tomorrow will basically be like today is. But that's really not the way things are now, especially not with the way things are moving. I guess I just wanted to address this idea that our biggest problem when we try to nail any of this down is the fact that we think linearly and technology is moving at an exponential pace.
And if you look at, like I said earlier, if you look at where AI was a year and a half ago when we first had the idea of Project Synapse, you look at it where it was then versus now. And even look at, do you remember when Sora first came out? Oh my God, this thing is phenomenal. But now look at all of the other tools that it pales in comparison to.
Because now we have Sora 2.
Right.
Yep.
Sora 2, which unfortunately is not in the hands of everyone yet.
Yes.
Let's put this into context, and I think this is an important piece, and it happens in technology, and we can see it. And you've talked about this, you talked about the chessboard, the famous story about the philosopher. He goes to this emperor, and this emperor says, "Can you solve this problem for me?" He says, "Yes, I can." And he says, "How can I repay you? I'll give you millions." He says, "No, I just want a grain of rice, and I want you to double it on a checkerboard each day." And of course, at the end of the checkerboard, if you do this exponentially, there comes a point, a tipping point in there, to use the Canadian expression from Malcolm Gladwell, comes a tipping point where suddenly you've got an enormous amount that's doubling. And those last few squares,
it would bankrupt the kingdom, yes.
They bankrupt the kingdom. And that exponential curve has happened in technology all throughout.
Yes.
Or to simplify it more, I love Oscar Wilde's piece, and I've been through this with a business that failed. How do you go bankrupt? Slowly at first, then quickly. And that's how technology happens. And so I still think we're in the bottom part of that upward curve.
Yep, I would agree.
But when it does twist upward, it's going to move at rocket speed. And where we are right now, I think, are some niceties. So let's just going back to our vibe coding piece. I think there's enough to make a substantial change in how we develop. I think we have some issues that need to be solved before that rocket curve. Some of them are security. Some of them are going to be the quality and maintenance of the code and how we deal with that. I'm not as worried about going after an ERP because God knows the world doesn't need one more ERP.
Yeah.
We have big systems. We don't need them right now. And by the way, they're not that damn secure themselves. If you take a look at what it's not SAP, it's Oracle ERP. Guess what? I'm going to be doing another show on cybersecurity in an hour or so. We're recording for the weekend, and we're going to be talking about how all of the companies that are on that ERP are getting emails from hackers who are saying, "We've got your information." So before we start to talk about how secure we are in ERPs and all those great monolithic systems we're running, we might want to just step back and
have a reality check.
Yeah. For most of what we do, I urge people to take a look at your company. Break your company down into what are the things we actually do. It's really a worthwhile exercise. It won't take you more than a half a day with people and get a whiteboard and just walk through the areas and talk about the major components of what they do and what's most important. And then find out how many of those things you could automate with a little system. I'll give you one example. We had at DMR when I was there, the nightmare was the last 3 days before month end, everybody got their expenses in late. Everybody does. I don't know how this works now because I don't run a big enough company, but everybody would get all their stuff in. You'd put in a spreadsheet. Somebody would have to analyze all of those expenses to find out whether they were semi-accurate. And semi-accurate. But the fact is, you need to code them. You need to make sure that they're reasonable so you can enter them in the system so you can get your month-end numbers. Did that myself with a little system that you could write in a couple of hours. Is it 100% accurate? No, but your people aren't. Is it close enough that I could actually do a posting on it? Absolutely. Will it come back and flip out and say, you bought this? That's against policy. Yeah. And how many hours does that take? And we have a lot of our work in companies where we staff for peak. The month end, you got to have enough people.
Of course,
you have to be trained. You don't need them necessarily all month, but you need them at month end, and they need to know your processes and all that sort of stuff. So you make work that fills up their job. So I'm just saying, if you take a look at all those things and down to little minute areas, your answer to your question, John, how much could you make a little ERP for a company? I think you could take, if we take the 80-20 rule, say 20% of your activities generate 80% of your costs, I think you could have your 20% ERP in no time.
I want to put it on the record right now that Jim Love is advocating for reducing headcount by putting in place systems that are just good enough.
No, but I think it is a terrible thing. I feel as after the speech I made yesterday, when I realized that I firmly believe we're going to lose 30 to 40% of the workforce in the next 3 years. You can call me dumb. You can say I'm a liar. I'm stupid. I don't know what I'm talking about. I believe we're going to lose 30% to 40% of the workforce in the next 3 years. I think it's going to happen in areas that are going to kill us. Financial services being one. And when you see 20% of the staff in financial services in the city of Toronto suddenly without work, and in New York and in London, you're going to see an incredible hit that we're going to take. I believe this to be something that's coming, and I can go back and plot it against other industries. I think it's going to happen in certain industries, in certain areas. It's going to have a huge impact. You have two choices, and I've had them as a business owner. You cannot keep people when what you're paying out in salaries exceeds your revenue. I did it far too long, and I probably may have made mistakes doing that. I certainly cost myself a lot of money over my career. I just couldn't let people go. But I'm not the guy running these places. There are people a lot less heart than I've got who are making those decisions, and they're going to cut them in advance.
So shall we do a little vibe coding demonstration?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is the heart of this. So yes, please.
Yeah. Okay.
Please proceed, Mr. Gannon.
I'm going to do the demo right now. I'm going to do it live, baby. Live, baby. So I'm going to do this in Firebase Studio, just for the start. This is Firebase Studio from Google. If you want to play with something that is interesting in terms of developing an application, this might be a place where you want to check it out. Is this the best there is? I'm not suggesting that for a moment, but I'm saying it's something where it's easy for you to get an account and it's easy for you to experiment without having to install a whole bunch of software on your PC and libraries and every other darn thing that would come with running something like Cursor or Windsurf, which is what you would be doing because you're effectively coding locally. So this is all web-based coding. This is you create applications in the web on Google's infrastructure and you publish it there for people to use afterwards. And as you can see, there are a bunch of things that I've been experimenting with and playing with.
Remember, we have most of our audience is audio, so I feel like I should be doing.
Oh, that's true. Okay, so let me describe it then. Yeah, let me describe it a little bit then. What I have is a screen where on one side it says, hello, Marcel, I'll come back, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a window that says prototype an app with AI. And then you basically type what it is you want this app to be able to do. Over on the right-hand side, it gives you a list of your workspaces. Those are applications that you have created. And there's also something that says shared with me. In other words, these are applications I'm developing with another person. So like if John wanted to work with me on prototyping or working on a project, we could do that here as well. The workspace over on the left-hand side, you can also suggest what languages you want it to use, whether you want it to use Python, Flask, Java, Net, a whole bunch of different things. It's up to you to decide the environment that you want to go into, or you just let the system decide, which is what I'm going to do here. I wrote, create a debate chat app where each room revolves around one funny, useless question. For instance, is cereal soup? Users join in with random usernames or GIF links and vote for their side. Each debate lasts 5 minutes with a countdown timer. Then the app declares the winning side. Use Firestore, which is the database that Firebase is using, to store debates, votes, and chat history. Add Firebase auth with guest login so that people can log in as a guest online and play this game together. And then there's a big button that says prototype with AI, which I will now click. So you click the button prototype with AI. And what it's going to do now is it's going to open up a window where it will show you all the code that it's generating and how the application is going. It's going to ask me some questions. It's going over and saying, and I'm just going to accept everything here. I could change it. I could see it'll say things like, these are the guidelines. I'm going to create a layout that has a clean, modern layout with focus on readability, headline font, blah, blah, blah. I could change all of these things, iconography, animation, whether I want animation for the timers, all these sorts of things. So it creates description of the prototype for you, which I can override. But in the end, I've got a stack. I'm using TypeScript, Nexus, Tailwind, CSS, Gemini, and GenKit. Sure, click the button, prototype this app. I'm going to let it go ahead and do this first pass for me. And as you can see, now it starts writing code for me. It starts building the application. It creates a source tree. You can see it's got the folder with all of the stuff. I've got source files. I've got my .env files with all the bits and pieces of code that need to be added to make this thing run. And it sits in the background that says reasoning about main app code. So it's thinking about all of the characteristics that I have asked for in the app, including the things that it said it thought would be a good idea, like the clean, modern layout and all that sort of stuff. And it's thinking about what that's going to look like and how it's going to work. And it's laying it out for you magically in the background. So this is like the first step in creating an app without you having to do much work other than to say, I'd like to create an app that does this, and then let it think through all of the background things. And again, it's fun to watch, actually. If you've never seen this before, it's fun to watch the system creating the code, adding bits and pieces, adding files to the code tree. And it's just cool to watch. And at some point, I don't know how long this will take, but at some point it will have an app that I can click the button and I can run it. And then I can take a look at what it looks like. And hopefully we can show that off before we wrap this up for the day. But this is all it takes. That's all it takes. You fire up something like this. And the beauty about this is I will have a share button where I can make it available to anybody and everybody that I want just by providing them with a link to the application.
Marcel, I'm assuming that just like any other AI, the more detailed you can, or the more detail you can put into your prompt, the more enhanced the application is going to be.
Of course, I could have just said, create a chat app, and it would have made a chat app. It could have been a very basic one, but I gave it some rules about what I thought. Like in this case, the chat app is a game that you play with other people. And so yes, obviously, the more you give it, the better. This is actually one of the reasons that Anthropic is pushing Claude Code or Claude Code. Well, it's hard to say those two things simultaneously. It's one of the reasons that they're pushing this conversational aspect to the AI, where you have a back and forth discussion about what the app is going to be. So it's actually a conversation. And at some point you say, yes, this all sounds good. Go for it and create this thing. So if you don't feel comfortable giving it a description that has all of the things that you want into it, start by having a conversation and say, I want to create this app. I'd like to discuss it with you. And then you go back and forth until you get to the point. And then you could have it open it up in Canvas and say, open it up and show me all the things that we've talked about until we have the layout or the requirements that I see that are necessary for this app. So if you can't come up with it, ask the AI to help you come up with it.
And I think it's absolutely incredible, and what we should be doing, which is this idea of asking the AI to help us pre-prototype these things and work out what you want.
And we have an app. So this happened fairly quickly, but for the people who are looking at this on YouTube, I'll try to describe it. We created an app called Debate Rumble, and Debate Rumble has, well, at the top it says Debate Rumble, and it's actually got a nice graphical headline where the world's most pointless arguments are settled. It's got a nice looking application basically ready to roll. If I click on issues here, it'll tell me that it could not reach Cloud Firestone backend. That's because I don't have my API key in there. I actually am not going to paste an API key at the moment, but
pretty good idea, yeah.
What I should do just for fun is once we wrap up here, I will paste my API key and I'll share it with you too. And we can have some pointless arguments and debates about.
Jim, both you and Marcel have talked about this before, and I've been doing a lot of it lately too, and it really helps, is ask AI to help you build this. In this case, the prompt that Marcel was using in Firebase. If you want to embellish it or enhance it, you can always ask the AI, ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, that I want to build an app. Can you help me with what prompting I should put in? And let it help you build the prompt that you can then copy and paste into Firebase.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to go back, Jim, to your comment about that we have our own human AI and his name is Marcel. He's actually a synth. He is our synthetic
I like that.
AI.
I like that. I like that.
Synth.
John, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to tell. That was our secret. So like the guy at YouTube who said, "You guys are AI generated." Look, guy, if I was AI generated, I'd look a lot better.
Yeah, no kidding. And we'd be a lot smarter. We'd be a lot better looking.
I'd be richer.
Yeah,
I'd be like,
exactly.
I'd be rich.
Yeah. If I had $1 trillion, I'd be rich.
I'd be rich.
Are we still killing time for you, Marcel?
Yeah, you're still killing time because I'm cleaning up one last error here, hopefully.
This is really terrible. It's going to take you like 8 minutes to make an entire system.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Jeez,
Really
guys,
terrible
please.
productivity. Okay, just don't
He's
listen
so
to us. Just
slow.
ignore us.
We may just have to post this one in the Discord so that people can play with it.
But it is the whole point of being able to do this. And you didn't come up with the title of the app either, did you, Marcel? That was
No, it came up with a title for me. Yeah.
which is what I'm always recommending to people who run AI companies. Please, God, let your AI name the things.
Yes.
Because you suck at it.
Yes.
Anyways, real simple. I'm not saying that there still aren't some issues.
The beauty of this is you will have done this really quickly.
So the whole point here is I created a rich graphical application that is accessible on the internet that I can share with you guys to play with. And really, I can just say, not logged in. I haven't logged in. Okay, that's fine. Anyway, I'm not going to do it right now. But the point is, I was able to create this thing very quickly, prototype it, have something that's actually quasi-working. I haven't integrated the login aspect of it yet. We'll just pretend it works at the moment, and I will share it with the rest of the Discord server. But it is a complex application. It's a graphical application. It's available on the internet. It uses an online database. It uses authentication. It uses a Gemini key in the background to be able to access the artificial intelligence behind it. And the whole thing happened in 8 minutes? And I grant you that I still need a couple of things. I need to set up the authentication on it so that people can log in remotely. But it's pretty damn impressive. And this is more than a simple go through my store and find out the SKUs that have weird things at the end of it. This is a multi-user, web-enabled application that tied into Gemini AI that people can use like today.
So just a question, Marcel, and just in terms of how you would approach this is, so you're going to run this application and we'll post a link so people can actually walk through it. Because even if we could go through the whole thing right now for an audio podcast, that could be a little boring. If you go to technewsday.com, just go to the podcast page. I will have the show notes up and there with Marcel's link so you can actually walk through it. But now let's say you wanted to make changes to this, Marcel. How would you tackle the code? Or would you just go back in and open it and say, I want you to change this?
I would just go back in and change it. And in fact, again, I'll do this like one more time here.
You just go back in, reopen the workspace and...
Back in and reopen the workspace. And if you take a look at it, there's the workspace. It's open. It actually says one issue down there. And I'll say there's still an issue. There is still an issue. Fix it, please. Whoops. Fix it, please. Got the SE. That's it. And I actually use an app called, there is something like that for the Mac I know as well, but I use something called whisper typing, where I just press the Control and the Shift key simultaneously, and it just writes whatever I talk. So half the time, I don't even bother typing. Obviously, I'm typing at the moment. Oh, by the way, pro tip. There was something that I was working on a couple of days ago, right after Claude 4.5 Sonnet came out. And I found that it wasn't fixing the problem that I gave it. And I took screenshots and I pointed red arrows. This is where the problem is. You need to multiply this by this to get this thing happening here. Oh, yes, I see. I'll fix it. This is Sonnet 4.5. This is like the supposed gold standard at the moment. Every once in a while, you run into this barrier where it just you don't seem to be getting anywhere. And you have a couple of choices here. One of them is you can just close the chat and then go back in and do something else. But in the case of a tool like Cursor, and I'm assuming Windsurf as well, although I haven't used Windsurf for a little while yet. But in Cursor, you can actually switch models at the bottom. And so right in the middle of a coding thing, it's, okay, I've been using 4.5. I've gone over this 6 times now, and it just doesn't seem to get it. So I switched to GPT-5, and I said, look, this doesn't make any sense. And I described the problem, and I said, go back through the earlier chat and see all the things I've said. And it came back and it said, yes, I see how this was misinterpreted, and I see what the problem was. And it went back through the entire code base and fixed it perfectly in one
You
pass.
switched models mid-project and had it look, and this is
Bingo.
like my famous, every time I do something that has a lot of numbers in it, I have another model check it. So, I mean,
Exactly the same thing. Now, I showed off Firebase Studio because it's the sort of thing that you can do online without having a local environment. This is something that anybody can fire up without, like I said, without having a Python development environment and a whole bunch of libraries on your PC. You don't need any of that crap. You just do everything online. The beauty about this other thing is I just say, look, this isn't working. Let's bring in another expert. And of course, the other expert in this case was GPT-5. And I solved the problem that I had been fighting with the AI for, it wasn't a humongous amount of time. It was about a half an hour. But after half an hour of giving the same instructions over and over again and saying, look, you didn't understand. And like I said, screenshots with red arrows pointing to where the problem is, it just wasn't getting it. And just bringing in another expert fixed it.
is a frequent problem. When an AI gets locked into a mistake, it often cannot escape that. It doesn't have a frequent problem. When it happens, it's just totally frustrating. You can't yell at it. There's nothing you can do. Sometimes you need to either just can it and go back and start something new or go to a different model. And I think that's something that people should do. But you can't do that in Firebase, right? You can't shift models.
Because Firebase uses Gemini. So you're using Gemini, right? So it's kind of hard to drop out of Google's own coding environment based on Gemini and tell it to.
Well, yeah, you never know. So some of the other tools that you've been using could do.
Yes, Cursor does that. I'm sure that Windsurf does this as well. And I'm sure that there are other tools. I keep coming back to Windsurf and Cursor because they're the 800-pound gorillas in the desktop development environments at the moment. I know that there's Microsoft Studio, but I don't use it, so I can't speak for it. Cursor,
take a look at it.
Windsurf are used by gazillions of people. My son was at Hackney North at the University of Waterloo a couple of weeks ago. Windsurf was providing people with their coding environment in 6 months of their mid-tier service free. So there are going to be a lot of people coming out of university that are using Windsurf. Cursor, I can guarantee it.
I'm starting to wonder about whether we'll have more systems than we have people.
Yeah.
There's that old line from Arthur C. Clarke, sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And there's Marcel's corollary, which goes like this. If it's distinguishable from magic, it's not sufficiently advanced technology. And I am the opinion with you, Jim, what you were telling these people at this conference that you were at. Yeah, people are going to lose their jobs. The question is, what do we do about it? Are we ever going to be living in a world where nobody does anything and we all just lie around all day? Probably not. But there are a whole pile of things that I know most of us could be doing if we didn't have to worry about a paycheck, including, to be perfectly honest, this show. We could just be sitting around talking about the technology that we live with and the world that we're in. And we could continue doing that whether we had a job or not. I know that you and I, Jen, don't have real jobs and that John is really the only person here with a real job.
I didn't say anything.
They can't fire us from this show because we don't make any money.
But wait a minute.
Yeah. I said this to somebody. They were talking to me about all of the things that were happening in their world, and they were getting a little depressed about it. And I said, at least the money's bad. Anyway, that's our show on vibe coding.
This is a place, yeah.
I think that's our show. Yeah. On vibe coding, I'd love to hear from real coders out there. I'm not a real coder anymore.
Neither am I.
But I'd love to hear from people with their experience. Please contact us at technewsday.com. Go to the contact us form. And if you're going to yell at us, at least say hi first. But I'd love to hear what this impact is having on you and what you think about it. And maybe we'll do a show that's a little more detailed or dive a little deeper into some of these things and check some of the issues that you might raise with us.
I'd love to see some of the applications and so forth that people have actually built. We talk about the tools. If somebody's willing to share how they've used the tools to build things, I think that'd be wonderful.
We could even invite them on the show. It's
Absolutely.
yeah.
Crazy.
What I'd like to do next week, guys, if you're up for this, though, I'd really like to do a show next week that just looked at where we are and how you get there in the most simple terms. So, John, I would ask that you would look at the Microsoft environment, say, I'm going to list all the things that are in there. Here's what they cost. Here's how you get to them. Marcel may be taking Gemini and saying, I'm going to walk you through and show you how you get these various pieces, what they are, and what's there. And I'm taking ChatGPT and going through that. And maybe we could add, I think those are...
Why, you're not going to take Anthropic? Okay, yeah.
But that leaves Anthropic out, but we could probably do that one easily as well. But I think that even taking just the simplest pieces of getting started, because that was what I noticed, and that I think it's so easy to skirt over because it's so simple for us now. Now, honestly, you could ask the AI to just say, I want to learn to use Claude, and it would tell you. I always discovered that I'm better off asking Perplexity how to use ChatGPT than I am asking ChatGPT how to use ChatGPT. It's not self-aware. It is very weird that way. I always ask another model how to explain how I use another model. And that's I find that kind of weird. But next week, we could be the models. We could actually walk people to a place of where they can get started. Does that make sense?
Right.
Now, are we just going to do...
program?
Are we just looking at coding, or are we looking at agentic as well?
No, I'm just talking about using it. I'm talking about about sitting down and saying, okay, if you really wanted to use ChatGPT, here's what it is. It's got these things. You want to get the pro version. Here's how you get it. Here's where so how you can get access to it, just for those people who want to get started.
Yes.
And
I'll do my best. I've tried for months to get a straight answer on some of the costs and some of the add-ons for Microsoft.
But that's perfect too. If we don't, what we don't know is, or what's difficult to find out is just as good as anything else. And I don't know where that will lead us, but I think,
yeah, for sure.
We're going into the Thanksgiving weekend, so maybe we can have some sort of thing after I don't know. We'll figure something out.
All right.
Sounds good.
Short of it. Live long and prosper. Oh, you getting there?
Live
By the
long
way,
and prosper. Peace and long life.
I saw a joke on Facebook about that, and it was Spock saying, don't use crazy glue.
Okay, we're gone. See you later.